were going to say. And just by looking at your biometric health evaluation, which we're going to touch on for a moment, but then also just once we got your metabolic panel and we were able to really let that data speak to us, it backed up everything you were saying on your biometric health eval. Okay. And what I want to just like commend you on is that typically when we get a biometric health eval on a male, sometimes it's hard to assess because I think, you know, it's kind of like with our D1 athletes or our NFL players that we work with or any high performers. Um, it's like a mentality thing. I think men are driven to kind of not see dysfunction and they're kind of you know, they go through life just handling things and doing the best they can. And sometimes symptoms start to feel really normal. And so it's sometimes hard to assess that there's something wrong. You did a fantastic job. So I think I was able to really see what's going on and start to see patterns of you know how you were experiencing your body. And then when I got the data and now I'm speaking to you, it's all coming together. It's all kind of tying together. So one of the first things that I want to mention is we definitely do see some GI dysfunction going on here. I think, you know, the big kind of red flag for me is seeing the one in your small intestine and pancreas. This really leads us to start looking, even before we have data, this starts to lead us to look at how the body is effectively utilizing insulin and glucose. And so even before having any data, I can kind of start to paint a picture that we could be seeing some blood sugar issues, and so we want to dig deeper. And so then when I see things like your liver, gallbladder, that number creeping into the moderate dysfunction, that just also kind of tells me that we could be seeing some backup of detoxification pathways. The liver might be a little sluggish, which you know we'll talk about in a moment when we talk about the job of the liver. And so then we keep going down. Now your endocrine right here. This is where I would have anticipated seeing a higher number with some of the wired but tired symptoms you're seeing, or like the ability to sleep for a long period of time but not wake up feeling rested. And then sometimes your body kind of is in that place where you can sleep 6 hours and you feel okay or well enough, you know.
Hmm.
That's that wired but tired, or that borrowing, you know, borrowing energy from different places in order to just meet the capacity that you have to get through for the day. We don't want you living in that place, Louise. We want you to be thriving. We want you to be, you know, able to do your job, able to feel really good doing it, able to give to the people in your life. And it's 100% possible. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about glucose when we get to the metabolic, but you can see even here you self-assessed as everything was looking good. You were trending up a little bit in your dysglycemia E, which means that you would have experienced more elevated symptoms of blood sugar dysfunction than someone who maybe is experiencing like low blood sugar. That does not mean you have high blood sugar or that you have low blood sugar necessarily. It just means that we could be seeing patterns of an ebb and flow, okay, which would speak to regulation and utilization. The mood part makes complete sense with your male prostate health here. The reason that this occurs is because when you're dealing with metabolic dysfunction, which we're going to dive into, everything downstream starts to kind of be impacted by that. That means the nervous system. That means your mood regulation. That means your sex hormones. There are so many different things that start to kind of cascade and domino into this dysfunctional pattern. And so we can see it on a BHE very clearly that it's starting to do that. And so we absolutely would want to test, which is what we did. Okay. So now I'm going to, let's see. Now I'm going to dive into your testing for just a minute. And we're going to kind of look at this a little differently. So like I mentioned earlier, we look at everything in a functional lens. So even though these markers are maybe within target ranges, I'm going to show you where we see patterns that show a way for us to be proactive instead of waiting to be reactive with our health. That's the whole functional point, is that, you know, if we're reactive, if we kind of apply more to an allopathic Western med model, we're waiting for things to break down, waiting for symptoms to arrive, and then we, you know, go to the doctor, we get seen, we match a symptom or a diagnosis with a medication, and then we are on that medication for the rest of our lives. But what we really try to work towards in functional is to see patterns that allow us to be proactive about our health and wellness, and to start seeing you know, things that are beginning to fall into dysfunction and how those connect to other things that maybe aren't out of dysfunction or out of function yet, that are trending towards dysfunction. Okay. So I will
Okay.
speak about these in singular markers, but I will also tie them to other systems in the body. All right. So before I dig in, I just want you to understand a little bit about metabolic health and why we start here. One of the biggest things that every single person needs to understand is mitochondrial health. Okay, ATP and mitochondrial health are basically your energy factories and then your energy output. So basically, if your mitochondria in the body is not healthy and not being supported, it starts to cascade into a lot of metabolic dysfunction, and it begins to start with each and every process that happens in the body. So if we tackle metabolic function first, then we know that we have supported or we have a really strong foundation for everything underneath it, including GI health, including sex hormones, including all of that. Okay. So when I look at your test here, the first place we're going to start is average blood sugar. It's up at the top there. 5.4 is not a concerning number. 5.4, even though it's creeping on the high side of normal, if you'd gone to your PCP, they would have told you you're good for now. Everything looks great. See you next year. Okay. The issue
Primary care provider, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The issue with this, Luis, is that it's only one small snapshot of what your body does with glucose. Okay.
Hmm.
That regulation happens. And so I always start looking at that number at about 5.3. When I see 5.3 and over, I'm going to dig into the other numbers that we test that tie to or connect to glucose. And so the next place I'm going to go is down to your fasting glucose number. So I always ask, I imagine you took this test on a fasted state, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. I always have to double check. Sometimes people miss that, and so that would skew the number. So fasting glucose is 97. That is not an optimal number. So even though it falls in the target range there of 0 to 100, or I'm sorry, yeah, 0 to 100, you can imagine if you had a glucose number of 0, that would you would not be alive. And so I don't want you to look at the target ranges and think, well, it's in a target range. They have to provide that because the algorithm is based on those numbers. But we read it functionally. So with 97, you're creeping pretty high to that target side, the high side of normal. I really like to see fasting glucose between 75 and 85 first thing in the morning. This shows really great regulation. It shows that the body is doing all the things that it needs to do in the evenings when you're resting and repairing. And setting you up for the day so that utilization of food and fuel can take place appropriately, which is what we leverage for weight loss or body function or
Hmm.
building or those types of things. So the fact that we're at 97 tells me again, backs up that we're seeing a little bit of dysfunction in our blood sugar, but we just don't have enough information yet. So the next place I look is your insulin resistance number. Now, this insulin resistance number is taken from several different markers. It's taken from first your fasting glucose, but also they do a fasting insulin in the lab, and that gives us the insulin resistance number. You are very highly elevated. Okay. So the good news about this is that we know it. All right. We know that there's insulin resistance in play. The bad news is if we don't rectify this problem, your goals of fat loss, of energy, of just, healthy mood and function is going to not be something that we're able to achieve. Okay. So what we talked about earlier, and I know Scott can appreciate this when we're talking about insulin resistance. Yes, we're talking about blood sugar and insulin, but more so what we're talking about is the ability for the body to leverage our food. Okay, because food is the most important tool we have in function. Okay, and so if we're not able to, if inappropriate responses are happening around the food we eat, like insulin is not being able to drive glucose into the cell and becoming resistant to it, now we've lost a very powerful tool to leverage in our weight loss efforts or anything else, hormone balance. And so that's why we look to insulin resistance. Now with 5.27, this only tells us you're insulin resistant. Okay, so insulin resistance can mean that you are either having issues first thing in the morning around regulation, or it can mean that you're having post meal spikes when you should have drops, and so that would show a utilization issue, or it could be both. So what we don't have is enough information to determine how best to rectify the problem. So I could throw a whole bunch of supplements at you, but that would be no different than me sending you to a PCP for a symptom and giving you a diagnosis and a drug. What we have to do is make sure that we're purposeful and that we're actually utilizing something that will stop that inappropriate pattern and then mediate it and then heal it. And then we can reintroduce food in a way that that the body can utilize. Okay, so what I'm going to want to do is probably a blood sugar log, Scott. Have we
Yep.
started a blood sugar log at all or thought about that?
No, not with Luis, but with other clients. And this
Perfect.
is making sense because he was self-reported, had
Yeah.
his self-reporting but been a little bit more elevated with the
Yeah.
dysglycemia than we would have given him the blood.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And that's the point right there is that, sometimes, Louise, we would have seen it on your BHE. Like, on the BHE here, I started to think that there could be a possibility because you have this small intestine pancreas number. Okay. And the pancreas releases insulin and when we eat, and insulin is what drives the glucose into the cell. So that's so tied to blood sugar regulation. And so that was, my first little red flag that something could be at play here, but then your glucose regulation didn't pop up. So this is what we love about objective and subjective testing and assessments is that we get to hear from the client what they are experiencing, but then the data really leads the protocol. And so what we want to do now is probably do a blood sugar log for I'd say 5 to 7 days. And I know with your travel, it might be easier to do like a CGM. So I'm okay with that, Scott. If it fits better, Louise, for you,
CGM.
yeah, like a continued one, instead of doing the one where he just tracks a finger prick, throughout the day, different intervals. You can get a CGM that will just, you put on one time and you wear it. It's a continuous glucose monitor.
Oh, got it. Continuous
Yeah.
monitoring.
So
All
there's
right.
two different options. So whichever is best, and then you would just take the data from that and add it to the sheet.
So you're
Okay.
not diabetic, Luis. However,
Right.
it sounds like you're gonna play one on TV for a couple
Yeah.
days.
Just for a few
Okay.
days while we gather some information.
Um,
Okay.
does that make sense, Luis? And that the reason why we're not giving you a solution yet, like in the form of supplements or anything like that, first is that we don't want to waste your time, right?
Hmm.
Just like with this test, we didn't ask you to do a blood sugar log because maybe you didn't need it, right?
Right. Right.
And now that we have the real data that's pointing kind of a stronger direction and getting more data in a more specific dysfunction, which appears to be insulin resistance is like, what do you call it? Suspect number one
Yeah.
in what's going on. Before we rule out anything, then we can start addressing it. Is that
Okay.
all kind of what you're seeing there? This is
Yeah.
really technical information to follow. So it's sometimes hard to understand everything.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure you're understanding kind of what these numbers mean, how this works, the role of insulin, because sometimes we take for granted what we understand insulin even does, all that good
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
All
have
right.
any questions on
Any
any of that,
questions
Louise?
around that?
No, the only concern I would have with this blood monitoring for five,
Yeah.
7 days is that each week is different from the other. So I'm just concerned that the data might be biased because
Yeah.
this week I was at home, so everything was normal. I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But the following week, I'm going to be having dinner at 3 in the morning and breakfast at 10 a.m. So I don't want that test to be considered final because
Yeah.
that's not my life.
That is such a great view. All right. So here's what I'll say. So tell me about your split. Like, are you one week on traveling and then you're off a week? How does that work for you? And let's find something. I'd like to test when you're home. Because number one, I think it's going to be easier for you. And you're right, it will skew the data if we're eating at obviously 3 a.m. and things of that nature. And even though that is part of your life, and I will put that into play when we review it and I build out any protocol for blood sugar, I think I'd like to make it easier on you because stress can also increase cortisol and uh,
Mhm.
raise your blood sugar. So I want it to be easy. So when would you be home next where you could even have 3 days?
Right now, it's not looking like that. I
Yeah,
travel like 3 days, have 1 day off at home, then I pick up again.
that's
I have
okay.
two days off, and then I go on 2 or 3 days. So
Yeah.
it's a pattern.
Okay, so let's do this. We can work with that. Let's do only the days you're home, and it might take you a week to collect this data or even a week and a half, and that's okay.
Okay.
So I just want you, when you're home, choose. So what that'll mean, Scott, is, and it might be good for you to just choose the days and decide which meal he's going to track. Because what I need is I need fasting glucose for every single one of those mornings that, we're home. And then each of those different times, pick a breakfast, pick a lunch, or pick a dinner and do them different. So on the first day that you're home, maybe you'll do breakfast. On the second day you're home, do lunch. On the third day, you'll do dinner. Okay. And that way I can see all three meals at different times of the day. Because again, with your job and the way that you are utilizing food, different times and things of that nature, it will affect the way your body processes. And this is probably one of the biggest reasons why your diurnal pattern is off and your cortisol, which affects your circadian rhythm, which is your sleep and your ability to rest and repair, that kind of thing. It affects blood sugar. Okay. And so I think that this is going to be one of those pieces that once we get this flipped around, number one, you're going to feel so much better. And
Okay.
you're really going to be able to utilize your food in a way to leverage it, to feel your best. So let's just go with that plan. I know it'll take some time to collect, but I think that's perfect. We'll be moving through the other stuff, and so that'll, we're not going to miss any time. Okay.
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 All right.
So to review, so I understand, Luis is gonna, you want 4 days, or how many total days do we need?
You know what? Let's just see three. Let's just do a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just however soon he can get
Okay.
those accomplished.
Yeah.
And then, just make sure he's putting the foods he's eating on the form. Because what I'm gonna what I'm gonna look for are those glycemic patterns of if we need to kind of shift nutrition a little bit. And I'll be able to see that in 3 days. That's fine.
Okay. So 3 days, and then with the blood sugar log, Luis, you'll be like my fourth client doing it. You basically can get, I don't think you need to get a CGM or a
Yeah,
fancy
no.
monitor. If you just go to Walgreens or whatever, you can get a blood sugar test kit that any diabetic person would use. And you
Okay.
prick your finger, it sounds like 3 times. And you're
Yeah.
gonna register the number that the reader gives you. And it's a little Excel sheet. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Once we have those 3 days with three different meals, we'll get rocking and rolling with going in a direction, it sounds like. And what's interesting, Luis, is my own panel looked very similar to yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a
I had
lot
the
of
same
the,
thing.
yeah, it's a lot of the lifestyle. I mean, that's really going to play into it a ton. When you have a broken schedule, number one, that's, we see this a lot in nurses and our colleagues that are doctors, things like this. It's very common. It's very common. And it's going to look bad as we go through it. It's going to feel like, man, I got a lot of stuff going on. But you know what? I just call it the core four. I call it the core four because metabolic is so easy to kind of like get in and in 30 days make a big difference. The core four are blood sugar, liver, oxidative stress, and inflammation. If those are supported and if those are in a good place, then Louise, you're headed in the direction of hitting all your goals. Okay.
Okay.
So with us seeing this blood sugar at play, the next place I'm going to go is total cholesterol. All right, I'm going to look at your lipid panels. Lipids always kind of freak people out because they think
Yeah.
if I have high cholesterol, I need to be on
Yeah.
a statin. I need to, I've got to stop eating red meat. I've got to really watch my saturated fat. That could not be further from the truth. Okay. So I want to kind of educate you a little bit around cholesterol, why we even look to cholesterol functionally. Cholesterol is created in the liver, all right, and it is a precursor lipid marker together with DHEA. They build the foundation for all of your other hormones. So you have to have good levels of DHEA and cholesterol in order to build all your other hormones that you need in the proper way. Okay. If you don't, if one is higher than the other or offset, now you're building that foundation on something that is not stable, right? So now we know that every other hormone that's downstream or built on that foundation is going to be suboptimal in function. Okay. So not only is the liver responsible for creating cholesterol, but it's also responsible for clearing excess amounts from the blood. So when you do a serum test like this is where we get to see those elevated numbers, and I'll kind of walk you through how that plays in. So when we're looking at cholesterol, the big hitters I'm looking for cholesterol for are to support blood sugar, okay, or glucose sensitivity. I'm looking for it for hormone balance, because testosterone, fat loss, any of these things are going to be directly tied to cholesterol numbers. So your cholesterol at 179 total, that is creeping on the high side of target. I start looking at that number at about 135. So 179 tells me that your liver is having a fine time creating cholesterol, but what it is having difficulty doing is clearing it from the blood, detoxing it, okay, from the blood. So we'll talk about why that's important in just a minute, but I want to stay with the lipids. So your total cholesterol, I'd like to see that lower for sure. Your HDL is suboptimal. Now, HDL, and you've heard this probably before, LDL is the bad cholesterol, HDL is the more you know, positive cholesterol number. So when we're looking at HDL that's suboptimal, what that means is it's not rising up to meet the capacity of what's happening in those lipid panels. So it's actually starting to fall down even more so, and LDL is becoming the winner. Okay, so that ratio is off. LDL is elevated at 113, and so we do need to flip that around. Triglycerides, again, when we see insulin resistance or any blood sugar issues, we know we're going to see triglycerides that are trending up. And so we see that here with 168 being elevated. So are you on any type of cholesterol medication or anything like that right now? Okay, good. All right. So what we're seeing right now in cholesterol is not the fact that you need to go on a statin or the fact that you need to stop eating, you know, red meat or things like that. What we're seeing is that we need to look to the liver and we need to see how the liver is functioning. Now, this is what I mean by this is kind of one of those ways to be proactive, because even though your cholesterol numbers are starting to show decline, they actually speak more. They actually speak more to your liver health than anything else. Okay. So when I go down to your liver markers, your ALT is 25. I'm happy with that number. It's a little suboptimal, you know, for where I would like it in regards to your AST, because your AST is trending up. Your AST at 33 is kind of telling me that your liver is overworking. Okay, it's starting to like, you know, starting to overheat. It's kind of like a car that starts to overheat. You can keep driving it, right? You're first of all, it's going to smell. You're going to have to turn off the AC. You know, all these things are going to have to happen, and you're only going to be able to drive it so far. And at some point, then what's going to happen is it's going to start working more and more sluggish. You know, we're going to have issues that are going to start kind of, you know, dominoing down. So at 33, that just tells me that we're starting to see a trend of it trending upwards. And then with your ALT being kind of in the middle, that would normally be a good place if your AST was a little bit lower. But the ALT trending in that mid range is also kind of showing that things are starting to kind of slow down. And that tends to happen with the liver. What happens first is it'll try to overwork to meet the capacity, the detox load, because that's the liver's job. It has over 500 jobs that it does in the body, but the biggest one is to detoxify toxins. It has phase 1 and phase 2 detox pathways, and it needs to be able to clear toxins from the body. So when we start to see that it's overworking, after a while, it will just go the other way. So there's dysfunction on both sides of markers. Some people think that we're only looking for those elevated markers, but we're not. We're actually looking for ways to show, has it been overworking for so long that now it's become sluggish in function, and how do we support that? So by supporting your liver, which we're going to do, I'm going to do.
Question, sorry to interrupt you here. I don't know if it matters. When I was 15, I had hepatitis A.
Yeah, yeah.
And ever since the doctor warned me, your liver's not normal anymore. It's going to be defective. It's healthy still. You can still live a normal life, but it's not going to be 100% optimal.
Yeah, and Louise, all of those things are factors, of course. But here's what I will tell you: we believe that the body knows how to heal. We also believe that there's gaps to fill. So there are times where yes, function becomes less optimal, and our job is to just find how to fill the gaps, how to support the body in the best capacity. So I think while we're moving through this, we may have to be a little more aggressive with your liver, you know, as far as just, you know, supporting it until it can pick up that kind of tox load and get back to work. But I don't see any reason, you know, why we couldn't support enough to really get you into a better place. The more and more we work on metabolics, the more and more your liver will feel supported and will kind of feel safe enough to start, you know, entering into that healing phase. And I don't think we'll have any issue doing that, even with that diagnosis. Okay, but I have made note of it, and we will kind of, you know, I always go a little slow when there's liver support in play, because We can be aggressive, but again, you can over supplement someone just like you can over medicate someone.
Yeah.
And, just because I throw a supplement at the body, that doesn't mean the body is in a place to utilize it or if it's bioavailable for it. With some GI issues, with inflammation, with all these things in play, your body may not be in a place to take on and absorb. So therefore you could just be, swallowing dollar bills. And I don't want to do that. I don't want us to do that. I want us to make sure that everything we do is purposeful. We'll probably do a phased approach where we step into it and then we become more aggressive as the body starts to feel supported and kind of rises up to meet us. And then we'll walk through it that way. Okay. All right, so we're going to support liver. We've got our blood sugar log. That's going to help us with our lipid numbers. We don't support cholesterol directly. Like there's not anything we would put in play for that. We know the systems that support cholesterol. That's going to be the liver. And so we really want to focus there. I will say that your vitamin D is a little bit low. 40, everyone's low in vitamin D, every single person. You can see the range, 30 to 10,000. That's crazy. I live in Cabo, Mexico, and I am low on vitamin D. Okay, so it's because we live in a society now that is very hyper aware, protecting our faces, putting on sunscreen. Where things have just changed in the way that that people even spend time outside or make time to take on direct sunlight. And so I think that's probably at play. But vitamin D is extremely important for metabolic health, for hormone balance, and especially for cholesterol. Okay, so I am going to suggest a vitamin D3 K2. The reason that
Right.
we say it needs to be K2 is K2 is what helps to make to uptake the D3 the best
Okay.
way. And so I do not suggest, especially with someone a profile who is showing oxidative stress, inflammation, gut issues of any kind. We need that bioavailability, so we need to drive it into the cells to be able to be utilized. So D3K2 is what I would suggest. All right. So we're going to look up here now at the things that I would say are probably two of the biggest markers on here for just overall wellness. And that's oxidative stress and inflammation. Okay. So first of all, I want you to oxidative stress at 10 is not optimal. Every time I read one of these labs, it kind of infuriates me because I know there are people who go to their PCP and are being told that things are normal on their labs. And then, they just continue to feel sick and to feel unwell, and there's no need for it. So when we're talking about oxidative stress, that GGT number, 10 is a high number, Luis. So anytime we see a GGT number, that tells us that the body is really struggling with toxic load. Okay. Remember, I talked about mitochondria in the beginning. Oxidative stress is the result of unhealthy mitochondria. Okay. So when we're talking about oxidative stress, the kind of the easiest way that I like to describe it is that you have antioxidants in the body that are meant to support immune, cellular regeneration, overall function. And that's really important. You've heard people say before, I take all these foods high in antioxidants or things like that. Antioxidants are things we need. The reason we need them is because oxidative stress is the imbalance of antioxidants to free radicals or unstable molecules in the body. And so what's happening in your body right now is that your ratio is off. You have more unstable molecules or those kind of bad or even possibly sleeper cells or things like that are not detoxing properly through the body. And so it's raising your level there. So the reason you're seeing that is because your liver is not functioning properly and can't detox. And so free radicals are always there, right? I mean, free radicals are created from stress, from poor eating habits, from not moving, from blood sugar issues, from a million different things we put on our face and skin. Anything can cause or be toxic to the body, and it has to be cleared. And when it can't, we start to see that GGT number climbing. So at 10, I would expect there to be large amounts of inflammation in your body, because when your body is toxic, what does the body do when it needs to heal or when it's protecting itself? It swells. So like acute injuries, if you were to sprain your ankle would swell to protect all the ligaments and the bones and everything while you're healing. Well, your body acts the same way when there's this like systemic dysfunction. It sees all of this like toxic load that's in the body, and its only response is to inflame, to try and protect the organs, to try and, all of this. So this is where we see things like GI dysfunction, things like bloating, because you're unable to have permeability, or there's dysbiosis in the GI tract. So just knowing that lets us know that if we were to just focus on metabolic, bring up the antioxidants in the body and bring down free radicals by supporting the liver to detox, we could then see that inflammation number going down. Okay. The inflammation number is important because, like I mentioned before, it can set up inflammation in the gut lining, making it impossible for us to utilize food, which is where we see blood sugar issues, making it impossible for us to utilize nutrients and things that are in our macros or our foods. So now we're not leveraging that the right way. And so you can see it kind of starts this cascade of problems. But this systemic inflammation also attacks your cells. And cellular health, without cellular health, we die. Okay, we don't exist. So when we're talking about, cellular health and inflammation doesn't promote, number one, regeneration of healthy cells, but more so the detoxification of what I call zombie cells in the body. These are those cells that are, they call them sleeper cells, or I refer to them as zombie cells because they remind me, like, when they're not active, they're not actually doing anything positive for the body, but they can't detox because they're just like stuck. So what they do is they'll wake up from time to time and they'll talk to the good cells, and they start to impress on them, and it causes those healthy cells to start to decline. And that's absolutely something we do not want. Okay, vitality and wellness rely on healthy cells and the regeneration of new cells. We lose billions of cells a day, and so we need to constantly be building new cells. So what I want to do there is, number one, just support oxidative stress by putting in some antioxidant support, but also some mitochondrial support. So typically I would start with a product that has high amounts of CoQ10, because that's like one of the best antioxidants that you can get. But I think that we need something more aggressive, especially for your lifestyle and kind of where you're sitting in oxidative stress. So I want to use a product called Power Fuel. Power Fuel is something you can utilize. Number one, I use it in my pre-workout. I love it. It's mitochondrial function. It has great things to support blood sugar. It has things to support mental health. It's the formulation is beautiful. Okay. But it serves the purpose of giving DMG in a small amount, antioxidants in a little bit higher amount, and then just focusing on mitochondrial health. So I'd like to use that, but I'd also like to use a product called DMG, that's dimethylglycine. And what this is it's meant to just go after those free radicals. It's one chew, you chew it every day, and it's meant to go after those free radicals and to really help your body deal with stress. Okay, so we see, I mentioned like our high performers. I have a marathon runner. She runs marathons all over the world. She's doing the Berlin one, I think it's next week. And she's a powerhouse, but she really breaks down her body in a way that causes a lot of stress. And when I did her protocol, she looked very similar to this. Very healthy, works out every day. She overtrains, and that causes the body to become metabolically inflexible. And one of the things that she utilizes is this DMG when she's training. So, especially when she's doing the marathon, she will probably go through 5 of these chews during the race because they do boost mitochondria, ATP. You have more energy. So I think you're going to really like it. It does take a little bit of time to start getting the liver working before you're going to see like these major things happening and feeling different, because we have a lot to clean up. But we'll get there. Okay. So I do want to use that product as well to deal with the inflammation. I am just a real big believer in, as you support, that inflammation is going to come down as all the systems start working more efficiently. However, I do want us to make sure that we are kind of supporting it until it can get to that place. So there are these things called specialized pro-resolving mediators. And what this is, it's a high dose of omegas. It's like the highest form that you can pull from an omega. All right. And so it's like a fish oil on steroids. All right. And so I don't want you to think that an omega is the same, because it's not. Omega support hormone balance, and they vary surface level. These specialized pro-resolving mediators are just that. they go in and they like find, it's like a little special ops team. They go in and they find that inflammation and they just attack it. They just go in and they really mediate that inflammation. And so I do want us to use a protocol of SPMs for the 30 days. And then we will probably switch to omegas to just support hormone balance. Okay. So, like I said, when I create these metabolics, they're 30 days in nature. I create for now, not for always protocols because I don't want your body, number one, getting used to being given something. Our job is to support the body until it starts to pick up. And then we're going to titrate down to allow it to move forward without support. Okay. So everything I do is aggressive in nature, but it's meant for now, not for always, so that we can pull back. Okay. So that is your metabolic in a nutshell. I